What's going on, guys? So today I'm sitting down with Stefi Cohen. I'm really excited because this is a conversation I've been trying to have for a while. We've kind of had a little bit of back and forth, but she's finally here. And we're going to be talking about a really, really interesting dialogue that she actually is kind of spearheading at the moment about women in the fitness industry. So first off, I want to say thanks so much, Stefi, for jumping on the podcast. It's great to have you here. And can you give a little bit of an intro to who you are and your background, just for some of the people who maybe aren't necessarily familiar with who you are?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much for inviting me on your podcast and for having me today. So for those of you who don't know me, my name is Stefi Cohen. I am a 25-time world record holding powerlifter. I started my athletic career back in Venezuela, where I was born and raised, playing for the national soccer team back there, and then bounced around a bunch of different sports, CrossFit, half marathons, eventually Olympic weightlifting, and then transitioned into powerlifting. And now I'm into boxing, I guess. I'm also the co-owner of Hybrid Performance Method, which is a platform that's dedicated towards distributing affordable and accessible online workout programs that are centered around strength for athletes and the general public as well.
Awesome. So I guess we'll just kind of dive right in and to frame the conversation, I guess, so people kind of understand where this is coming from. You have been a really big sort of influencer in the fitness sphere and kind of even outside of that, and a role model for women in general. At least that's kind of my perspective on things. And you've led some really interesting discussions, especially lately, around kind of like what it means to be a woman in within the fitness industry, as well as sort of like, I don't even know, maybe like the sexualization, the objectification of women, and then what your part is in that, because you have a business and it's beneficial for business. And so it's been a really interesting conversation to kind of see how that's developed over the last little while. And so just especially given the sort of new path that you've been kind of pursuing right now, how has that changed your perspective and your brand and your voice within the industry?
Okay. Yeah. So when I first got on social media and started doing this whole thing, I was mainly using social or Instagram as a training log. I was just putting up my videos of my training and whatnot. Then that developed into more of a marketing tool for the service that I was providing with hybrid, and it developed into something that was more, I guess, curated and pre-planned for the purpose of selling things, whether it's apparel or training service or nutrition service. In that process, I felt, and I've always felt like that, given that, I come from a strong academic background. I got a doctorate level degree in physical therapy. And I've always, I've played professional sports at the highest level for my whole life. And I felt that there's a certain kind of standard that females in positions of authority and females in sports are kind of forced to adhere to, just to be taken seriously. So I didn't even notice that I kind of like fell into that trap of like, because I'm the type of person that goes against the grain all the time. And I didn't even realize that I was really heavily conforming with some very strict societal norms about just, it could be simple things, the way that I dress, the way that I portray myself on social media. I don't know how I communicate. Like, it's very subtle things. I've noticed that, something that I used to do was I would change my voice when I was talking about something educational or academic. I would lower my tone of voice and I would speak differently so as to be perceived more, with a more authoritarian tone. It's just these little subtleties. And it wasn't until last year where I had, I call it an epiphanal moment, but pretty much I met this couple. Their name are Christina and Mike, and they own Orangutan Studios. So they do a bunch of photo shoots for girls for OnlyFans. And they grew up in the same town as me in Caracas. So I met them at a party and they were like, oh, if you ever want to do a photo shoot, we'd love to have you. And when they showed me their work, I didn't know who they were. But when they showed me their work, I looked at it and I was like, I mean, those women are beautiful. Those pictures are amazing, but I'm not like them. I'm not sexy like that. I just do my muscles and I do my bicep curls, and the photo shoots that I do are with sports bras on and action shots and all about how jacked I can look, how athletic I can look. And that is it. Like, I'm not, definitely would not look good wearing a bathing suit, posing like that. And they were very encouraging. And they would just say, well, listen, if you're ever interested, and if you ever want to explore that side a little bit more, we're here whenever you want. So eventually I took him up on it. And I just said, whatever, like, if the pictures come out terrible, I'll just never, we'll delete them, never use them, pretend it never happened. And it was interesting because it was my first time doing a photo shoot for something other than fitness. And it was my first time kind of trying some feminine poses, as silly as that sounds, but putting makeup on and letting my hair down and wearing cute outfits. And as soon as I saw just some of the pictures they were taking on their camera, like just as they were taking them, and I looked at myself through their lens, essentially was able to look at myself from another person's perspective, right? And it was so eye-opening, because for the longest time I had been suppressing that feminine side at the expense of conforming with these societal norms in order to be taken seriously by the industry, in order to, I don't know, not be put into like the fitness girl category. I don't even know like exactly why, but upon further, I started internalizing what I was feeling, and I started doing some research, and I came across this branch of sports psychology that studies the female athlete. So it's called the female athlete paradox. And essentially what that is, and this is the central topic for a book that I'm writing right now. But essentially what it is the dichotomy that female athletes have inside of their brain in terms of their identity. So you have one part of your identity that heavily associates with you as an athlete. I'm an athlete. And what is the characteristics of an athlete are generally more masculine in nature, right? Aggressive, assertive, bold, violent, upfront. I don't know. Those are the characteristics that you would exhibit, or traits that you would exhibit if you're kind of letting out your athletic side. And then there's a feminine side that obviously if you're a girl and you're an athlete, there's also that side. But because of society and because you want to succeed and be taken seriously and be feared by your competitors, you completely neglect that side. It's also frowned upon to nourish that side when you're a female athlete. It's something that for some reason is not accepted in society. You're either an athlete or you're a sexy girl. You cannot be both, apparently. So it's a really difficult kind of internal struggle that most female athletes go through, in that kind of tug of war that happens in your brain, because it's natural for a female to want to feel wanted, to want to feel sexy, to want to, be praised, to want to be told they're pretty and they're good looking and that their bodies look good or whatever. But we all feel like we can't really go there. So we hide underneath really baggy sweaters, and we hide with our backwards cap. Like, I cannot tell you how many years I spent just wearing baggy t-shirts and leggings or joggers and backwards hats. And I remember the feeling like anytime a girlfriend had a wedding or whatnot, I would put on a dress and feel ridiculous. I felt like my body just did not belong in that dress. And my body looks exactly the same now. But it's just that shift in perspective that was so powerful and so empowering, that, hey, listen, I can be a badass athlete and I can also be sexy as fuck, and it's fine. Now, obviously, with that comes, again, challenging stereotypes and challenging societal beliefs and norms. And that always comes with a price. So within my little social experiment, I've done 3 photo shoots now with Mike with orangutan, and I've posted several of those photos. And this is what you were alluding to initially in our conversation about the discussion that I've been starting on social media. And it's really the dialogue is really interesting. But what was most interesting to me was that every time I posted one of those photos, even though they got a high amount of exposure and engagement, they always, like, for that entire week, it led to a net loss of like 10,000 followers, which was super interesting for me to see. There
That's a
was
huge amount of followers.
yeah, I love every time I post a picture like that, I lose 10,000 followers. That's why I have to space them out. Even though, I'm doing it for, there's reasons why, I'm writing a book. I want to start a conversation around it. I want to open the topic for discussion. I want to see how other female athletes feel. But yeah, it's severely negatively impacted my brand in some ways. Maybe those are people who are conservative, who have never seen that side of me and just are not, are not about it. I don't know. There's definitely a certain group of people or amount of people that are accepting of whatever I want to do. But there's definitely some kind of really extremely dogmatic people that just don't want to have an open mind about that. So within that, it's the whole topic of sexualization and objectification of females for the purpose of marketing and advertisement. This is something that's been going on for fucking 100 years. We've been using sex to sell products for as long as marketing has existed, right? For some reason, when it's a marketing agency or it's a brand that's using a female, a sexy girl or a sexy guy, when it's them using it for the purpose of selling something, it's fine. When it's you using it, your own image, to sell something or to get more exposure so that you can get more opportunities, because in this day and age, your social media is pretty much everything. So shame on you. Shame on you if you're a beautiful girl and you're using it to get more eyes on you. How could you? And it's funny because I used to think like that. I used to look at, these beautiful girls that had millions of followers and I would resent it. I'd be like, I'm doing it the hard way. They're doing it the easy way. Shame on them for showing their tits and ass. And then I'm like, why? Like that is marketing and advertisement. People have been using these tactics forever. But for some reason, if you do it for yourself, it's frowned upon. Recently, about a month ago, there was a reggaeton artist. I forgot who it was. I don't know if it was J Balvin. I don't want to say the wrong name, but it was a reggaeton artist who, obviously, if you've watched any reggaeton videos, it's all, the guy singing and then chicks with massive tits.
Really sexual, yeah.
Super sexual. So one of the girls that appeared in that video started doing OnlyFans and started posting more risque photos after she gained some notoriety from that video. And he blasted her online, like calling her a slut, saying, just essentially making her feel bad for switching her or for exploring that side and making more posts that were more sexual, sensual, whatever you want to call them. So I just found it really interesting. And then that opens, and this is a discussion that I'll obviously express my personal points of view, and I'll likely interview more people that are in the field, but it just becomes a moral and ethical question of, okay, where do you draw the line between, being sexualized or being objectified, being vulgar, being artistic. And obviously, I think all of that stuff is subjective. I don't think there's a right or wrong answer. I'll happily write about what I think and speak about historically what's been thought and what people in that field think. But I don't know. I just think it's such an interesting topic of conversation and so relevant now with social media and OnlyFans. And I just realized that for some, there's not. I haven't found a single book that talks about the female athlete paradox and what we go through trying to juggle our identities. Sorry, that was super long-winded.
No, it was great. And you touched on a lot of the great points. I've just kind of been making notes here. So you mentioned a handful of things. And one of the things that I really appreciated anyways, that I thought was sort of unique to the dialogue you were bringing up was there is a certain level of authenticity there, right? So right off the bat, I remember in one of your captions, like I actually saved it. I sent it to like a bunch of people because I was like, this is legit. Because I remember you saying like, I am doing this to get eyeballs. I am doing this for this, but why the fuck can't I? And I was like, obviously you said it differently, but I'm just kind of paraphrasing here. And I was just like, wow, like that's actually authentic. And I think it was funny because there does seem to be this sort of dichotomy or this polarization where it's like, you can't, like, for some reason, wanting attention is bad. Like, in a relationship, if you want your partner's attention, that's great. It's totally normal. It's very healthy. But then if you want attention on social media or something like that, and attention could be a variety of different things to different people, then somehow it's really, really negative and frowned upon. And I understand there's a little bit of a spectrum there, right? Like someone who has secure self-esteem versus maybe insecure self-esteem, and they're kind of needing that social validation. But it's really interesting, and it's kind of really complex. And so the one thing that I really liked was the whole need to be wanted that you were bringing up. And that is seen as really inherently negative, which I don't necessarily think that it is, right? And it depends on, I mean, I guess like a whole host of things. And the second thing that I thought you said that was really interesting was kind of the burden of autonomy, or authenticity, sorry, was the moment that you started doing these things, you started getting, unsubscribes and people, bailing on you. And I just kind of, even every now and then I'll look through the comment section and see some people who are just kind of being dicks about it for no real reason. And that's kind of something that you have to go through, which is weird, right? Like anytime you're authentic, if it's different than what you're perceived, like what you should be doing, quote unquote, all of a sudden you get all this hate. And it's so funny because I honestly think that most people genuinely would agree with you. But then the public perception is, oh, I can't agree with her because that's not, that's frowned upon or whatever. And it's just like, why? Like we all agree. Why are we all playing this game?
Yeah, but it's so interesting because this has happened, and it still happens to me, especially surrounding the topic of OnlyFans. There is the way that I feel about it internally, and then there's the way that it's almost like the way my heart feels about it and the way my head feels about it are completely different. Like
this major cognitive dissonance.
Yeah, my heart says, girl, go do whatever you want, right? And my head says, shame on you.
Yeah.
It's weird, but there's nothing to be shamed for. But maybe it's just like years and years and years and years of listening to the same narrative that it just makes it really difficult for people to be able to fully switch in their head. I don't know. But yeah, I wanted to touch on your second point, the burden of authenticity. I think it's interesting because most people are afraid of showing who they are and what they stand for. And it even could be simple things like their humor, people hold back on it, or political thoughts, or it could be training things or whatever it is. People are really afraid of being judged and afraid of being unfollowed and afraid of being, I don't know, looking silly if they say something. I was just having this conversation with Hayden, with my partner. He is so funny. He's hilarious. Like when it's nighttime and we've both had a couple of beers, he cracks the best jokes and he's so funny. And I'm like, man, you should use some of these jokes on the podcast. You're so funny. And he's like, you think, like, what if I offend someone? And I'm like, man, honestly, if they get offended by a joke like that, like such a lighthearted joke, fuck them. Like those are not the listeners that we need anyway. But a lot of people are afraid of actually speaking up what they think. But it does come with a territory. I've been a contrarian my entire life. So I'm used to the backlash that comes with it. A funny story on the side. When I was 12 years old, so I went to a Jewish high school. When I was 12 years old, remember they forced us to go pray in the morning. Like it was like 6:30 a.m. praying session, whatever. Like you go with your little book that has a thing, and then you go in and sing for like half an hour or whatever. I remember going in one day, and I'm just like, I have my book in my hands, and I'm looking around, and everybody's singing like robots, right? And I'm looking around in Hebrew, and I'm like, fuck, you guys have no idea what you guys are saying. So I went and bought myself one of those books that have the translations. So it was the Hebrew, and then on the other side it was in Spanish. And the stuff that we were saying, I'm like, Lord Almighty, all powerful, take my soul. I'm like, wait, what the fuck is this? So it just got to a point, and it's not that I don't believe in God, whatever, that's a conversation for another time. But I didn't like the fact that I was being essentially forced to do something that I didn't even understand. So I went to my professor and I was like, listen, So cool. You know, I don't have anything against this, but I don't want to go in. I was 12. I don't want to go in. I don't want to do it. I don't want to read it. And oh my God, was that an issue? Got sent to a psychologist, to a counselor. But that's, oh yeah, it was,
Wow, really?
yeah, it
I
was
mean,
a
I guess
full,
it's a religious school, but I'm surprised they would send you to a psychologist. Like, what the heck?
yeah, yeah. They thought it was weird that I was at that age that I was challenging that stuff.
Yeah,
But
that's so funny.
that's the way I've been my entire life.
Yeah, so I on my podcast, I've had a handful of controversial, I guess, episodes. So I had one of the experts who published the most recent kind of research review on transgender athletes in competitive sports, right? Looking at biological differences and advantage, and whether or not hormone therapy um, kind of change that, right? And not to really get into the details, but that's obviously a very, very sensitive subject, and doesn't necessarily matter, what the data says. It's kind of like people have their own opinions and kind of feel a certain way. And I also had an expert on COVID research come in, because in Canada the laws here are just like, they're just absolutely crazy. Like, they have curfews and stuff. They can get automatic search warrants to come into your house whenever they want. It's really nuts. And so, anyways, I had someone come in on the episode, and I remember um, I got kind of nervous about that myself, because I was like, oh, I feel like people are gonna take this the wrong way. I might get banned. And like, I did start noticing that my posts started getting removed from Instagram. Um, but I was a little bit nervous, but not too much. And then I remember, like, someone was like, "Man, how do you do all this stuff and you don't really care?" And then I remember, like, not too long ago, I took, the Big Five personality test.
Yeah.
So I took that, and I like, I am complete on all the ends of the spectrum, right? So I'm like 98 percentile for oh, what is it? Gosh, I can't remember what the word is, but anyways, and then for agreeableness, I was in the 0 percentile of agreeableness, and I was like, oh my God, that's so bad.
Yeah, that
But
gets me in trouble all the time.
yeah, yeah. But I was like, I guess I'm predisposed to just kind of saying whatever I want. So it's got its benefits, but it's definitely got some drawbacks for sure. Um, but anyways, conscientiousness. That's the one. Yeah,
Conscientiousness.
yeah. I don't know why I
Wait,
forgot that.
I want to go back. So you said two things. One, being wanted. Two, the burden of authenticity. So on the topic of being wanted and wanting attention, what people don't realize also is that a lot of I guess girls and guys, but if you are building your social media presence for the purpose of either getting sponsorships, endorsements, or building your own brand, building your own business, attention is a zero sum game. You're competing for people's attention, and if I have it means that you don't have it, right? And that's the game. That is the game that we're all playing right now on social media. And it has nothing to, I don't think it has nothing to do with ego. It has nothing to do with being a narcissist and like wanting people to like adore you and tell you that you're beautiful. It really has nothing to do with that. It has everything to do with trying to build your personal brand and trying to get business. That's it. Especially people with big social media presences. People are so quick to judge. Oh yeah, you're just doing it because you're a narcissist and you're self-centered. You know how many times I've heard that? Narcissist and self-centered, and all you want is people telling you that you're pretty and you want sympathy. And I'm like, bro, I want none of that. I have a boyfriend, I have a family, I have friends that are real, that I interact with in the day to day. I don't need that from random people on social media. That means absolutely nothing. What I need is their eyeballs and their money. That's the truth.
Yeah, and that's a great point, because I think that the identical action can have two very different motives, right? And I mean, there are some times where it's kind of transparent, but at the same time, like, yeah, if you have a business, it doesn't really make a whole lot of sense to be like, oh, this is something that I'm just doing for me. It's this and this. It's like, you have a business. Like, Coke does it, Nike does it, everyone does it because it
Ev-
works. And yeah, I mean, you look at what was it, Gillette. Gillette's the only one that I can remember that was kind of the most recent. I'm really not involved in like a lot of social media stuff. I have it because of my business, but that's it. But I know that they made a commercial to just capitalize on like the whole woke movement, and they were doing something that was like sort of anti-bullying or anti-men. I don't remember exactly
Yeah,
what it was, but I know it had a really
true.
negative response.
Yeah.
And it's like that's just what businesses do. They look at trends and they try and capitalize on what's popular. And actually the funny thing too is that people get so pissed off about this stuff, but it's like the Instagram algorithm literally just puts more stuff in front of you that you engage with. So if you're pissed off about negativity, it's like that's you. That's literally your decisions that are driving these posts that are coming up, you know?
It-
So it's kind of funny.
yeah, and there's honestly there's no such thing as bad publicity.
Yeah.
Some of some of my
Yeah.
times of biggest growth on social media have been times where I've got slammed by a bunch of people for who knows what. Like I remember that the first time I deadlifted 525, I did it in it was a seminar. I did it at the end just for fun, and
Well, you didn't really do it. I mean, you used a deadlift bar and straps and blah blah. Yeah.
bumper plate.
Yeah, exactly.
Controversial topic. That
Yeah.
was ridiculous, but it was great because it was everywhere. Jason Blaha made a video, Kenny KO, who the fuck else knows who. I'm pretty sure Kabuki wrote actually a positive article about me.
Yeah.
And I don't know, a bunch of people. And it was great. Yeah, whatever.
Well, that's
Go.
how I found out about you. Because I remember seeing that and I was like, no fucking way this girl pulls that much. And I remember seeing the video and it was almost like an optical illusion at the time. I was just like, I know that I saw it, but I can't process it. And then I remember reading the comments and everyone's like, oh, well, it's a deadlift bar. And I'm like, are we seeing the same thing? Like, am I seeing the same thing as you? And you're still upset about the deadlift bar? I was like, come on, man. Like, what's going on?
There
Like,
were
how much can you lift?
the straps and the bumper plates. They think that automatically makes you able to pull that.
I know. Well, it does add like 700 pounds to your deadlift,
Yeah.
obviously. So, yeah.
At the very
It's funny because I actually can't lift as much with straps as I can just hook grip. Like
Really?
I just find that with straps I can't get my lats as tight for some reason. I don't know why. So, but
What
that's just
what
me.
strap do you wear?
Oh, I have the really nice one. They're like it's like a little loop and then you just kind of fold it over.
Okay, yeah, I know.
It's not the figure eight one.
Okay.
It's
I know
like
which one.
they were for like the Olympic weightlifting. I used them for that.
Okay. I use leather ones. I find that those are I don't know. They really grip the bar tight so you can let loose almost like let loose of your grip and just focus on
Yeah.
the rest of it.
Yeah. Anyways, just kind of getting back onto onto topic. How do you differentiate between objectification and admiration? Because a lot of the times it's really difficult and it's so subjective. And I mean, you can say that someone's doing something for a certain reason, but you don't really know until you know them.
I think it's that's when personal choice essentially enters the chat. If you're choosing like who's up? Well, if you're choosing to take those photos of yourself and you're choosing to put those pictures up on the internet, then whatever however people react to that, it's essentially their problem. If you're doing it for yourself and you're happy with it and you feel positively about it, then you can't really control how people are gonna feel about it, right? So if they want to objectify you, that's their problem. But as long as you don't feel like you're objectifying yourself, then it's okay. I think.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. Especially with OnlyFans, things have kind of gotten really weird, and but it's funny because if anything, OnlyFans kind of validates what you're saying in a way, you know what I mean? At least in my mind, because it's like everyone's like, oh, you're a hoe, you're a this, you're a this, if you have an OnlyFans, but then they create a fake account so they can sign up, and it's like, okay, like what? I don't know. I don't get why people continue to play this like cat and mouse game, and they like pretend. You know, it's kind of like the whole masturbation thing. I know not to get vulgar or anything like that, but it's like, you know, someone gets caught because someone is like videotaping inside their house, and they get caught masturbating or something like that. And it's like, oh my god, that's disgusting. And it's like, dude, everyone does
Yeah.
it.
Yeah, you do
Like
it too.
everyone, like how are you seriously going to sit here and like judge this guy for doing something in his house where some creep gets, you know, like videotapes inside his window or something like that. And it's just like, it's so funny how people just can be so, I don't know, like two-faced about these things, right? It's like,
Yeah.
oh, my hands are clean.
Yeah. I mean, there's always going to be people who are, it's the background, like how they grew up, what their beliefs were growing up. And it's usually just the more conservative people that view that as something that's frowned upon, using your body in exchange for money in any way, shape, or form, whether it's pictures, videos, chatting. I think there's always going to be a subset of the population that will never accept that. I know my mom's one of them. My mom, every time I post one of those photos, she doesn't talk to me for like 2 weeks.
Yeah, just super old school.
Super old school. So I think, there's something to be said about that, about it, and this is something that I'm interested in as well, is the power of persuasion. How do you, and is it possible to change people's minds about topics that are deeply ingrained, whether it's cultural or whatever your upbringing, whatever it was? I think it's almost impossible. Almost impossible.
Yeah.
So it's
Yeah,
like,
it's really
so
hard.
even though, because I think these conversations that we're having and talking about the female athlete paradox, talking about OnlyFans and objectifying women, sexualizing women, it's good for essentially girls or guys who might be in the same situation, experiencing that, so that they can understand better, how other people think of them and why they shouldn't feel that way, or it's just for essentially for us to, I hate the word normalize because it's been overused, but just so we can normalize what we are doing and justify it or feel better about ourselves. But it's never, I don't expect that any of these conversations are going to change anybody's mind. It's impossible.
Yeah, it's really interesting. Like, internal bias is really, really interesting because even the other day, so like I said, I'm not really big on social media. I don't really scroll through. I only follow a couple hundred people, and it's like all either researchers, sports scientists, or lifters, you know? And so I don't really scroll through a whole lot. But the other day I saw someone, like one of my friends, post something, and he wrote, I 100% support the government enforcing mandatory vaccinations, blah, 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 blah. And I was like, wow, I'm really surprised. And so for me, I'm very libertarian. So I'm like, I don't think you can force bodily autonomy, like you can remove bodily autonomy. So me, I was very against that. And I'm like, this is crazy, but I'm not really a big commenter. So I looked in some of the comment section, and everyone's like, just read. I kept seeing these comments where it's like, reread it, just reread the post. And so I reread it like 4 times, and it's like, I fully support the vaccination. And it took me 5 times. And on the 5th read, I finally saw that it said, I 100% support government mandated vacations.
That's
And
so,
so many people were lighting this guy up in the comment section. And I was like, oh my God. And like, because of the current COVID state, because of a lot of the threats. And it's like, I read it 4 times and just projected my own interpretation on it. And it was
dude.
really wild because that was such a great reminder of like how strong our own internal biases are. And like, I mean, I do research reviews. That's like 60% of my job is I write research reviews, and so like I have to be very objective. All my articles are very neutral. They just kind of present the evidence. And yet here I am still looking at this from a very specific biased lens. And I was like, wow,
Yeah, you
and it's crazy.
just want to jump into it right away.
Yeah, absolutely. So that was it was a really interesting reminder of like, no matter how objective you think you are, you always will have a bias. And like you said, it's like, your upbringing, your history, your life experiences all kind of shape this stuff. So
But
I thought that was a really interesting lesson.
what's your background, like, academically?
I actually don't have a strong academic background. Like I took diplomas and stuff like that. I'm kind of a nerd and I read a lot. So
Okay,
it's like
you're a scientist. So,
a bit of a stretch, but okay.
yeah, no, you are. Um, the awareness that people like you and I have about internal bias and about just thought formation is what allows us to be able to read something. And even if you do have or you have already formed an opinion about whatever you're reading about, you're able to remove yourself from that and look at data and look at the facts objectively, and for a short period of time remove those biases and try to see the other side. But I think most people are not. They don't have that awareness of, okay, like I have, I've been programmed this way for my entire life, but this person is saying that is there's another way. Okay, let me look at it from their point of view. What are they saying? What are the facts that they're presenting? Why could they be right, or why could they be less wrong than me? People lack the ability to do that, and that's honestly, that's a big problem in this country. Just how
Yeah.
unable people are to listen to other people's points of view, accept it, analyze it, and potentially change their minds. I think it's, man, it's a problem.
Yeah, it's difficult. So prepare for the smoothest transition in podcast history.
Do
Um,
it.
one of the things that I wanted to find out was whether or not you feel the need to be a role model, because I've seen people kind of project that on you, and anytime you do have a certain amount of influence, it is kind of at least hoped that you are going to be a role model for children and women and whatever it might be. Do you feel the need to do that?
I don't necessarily would call it a need, but okay, so
Sorry, pressure.
pressure, to a certain extent, yeah. To a certain extent, yeah, because I think I'm in a very unique position. Um, just given the amount of exposure that I have, and kind of my life trajectory being so focused on school and athletics and business, I think I have a really interesting perspective to offer, and kind of a unique and interesting perspective and trajectory that might be, motivational or inspiring for other people, just given all of the barriers that we're put on as females. So I think that, yeah, I'm in a position where I kind of have to own that, and I'm in a position where I think I can help a lot of people. And from a very young age, I don't necessarily believe in life purpose, but I do believe in finding something, finding meaning in your life through fulfillment, not necessarily through happiness, but there's a difference between happiness and fulfillment. Happiness is something that comes and goes. There's industries that are dedicated towards making you dump money for this thing that'll make you happy, or read this book so you can be happy. Being happy is like any other emotion. You're sad, you're happy, you're upset, it's just another human emotion. It's not something that we should try to seek. We should try to seek fulfillment and meaning in life. So for me, one of the things that brings me the most fulfillment and the most meaning is being able to help other people, to service others. I honestly think that that's what I was put on this earth to do. Call it purpose, call it meaning, call it whatever you want. It's what makes me happy, what makes me feel fulfilled. So yeah, to a certain extent, I do feel that responsibility, and I feel like I'm just, to not do it would, to not follow through with that would be irresponsible. I definitely, so I'm planning on writing a children's book with my sister. It's kind of like a family project, but it's a children's book that it's essentially about my life. How I was always, it's kind of like the person going against the grain, and a tomboy, and not really like accepted by other girls, and had a hard time finding my place in just kind of like with friends or socially, moving into cracking a male dominated industry like the fitness industry, participating in male dominated sports like powerlifting and even boxing, and how that's made me feel, how that's been empowering, all the things, all the struggles, all the things that I've had to go through, all kind of like the central topic of this children's book is going to be essentially the limitations that are placed on you by society. So the way I envision it is like, you're essentially given a map when you're a young kid, and you're given a map that has a bunch of options. And the thing that happens with a map is that the territory that's portrayed in the map are the ones that the person who wrote the map was able to discover. But that doesn't doesn't depict an accurate picture of what's actually there and what more land is available or what other options are available. It's just the ones that they've been able to see. So essentially, it's an outdated perspective of what you could do. And I find that analogy so relevant with just the way that our education system works. Just think about starting a career now. Like if you're going into college now, the job that you're gonna do after those 4 years doesn't even exist at the beginning of school. And you know what? I was in my second year of undergrad when one of my advisors said that to me. They're like, don't worry about being so focused on exactly what you need to be doing, because likely what you're gonna do doesn't even exist. And spot on. Like, look what I'm doing. I made my own job. I scratched that map, and yeah, I used it as a guide, right? I went to college, I got my doctorate level degree. I did follow certain paths, but then from there, I kind of created my own. So that's going to be part of the topic of the book, just to kind of encourage young children to explore for themselves, and not let themselves be limited by the expectations of society and the path that is predetermined for them by their teachers or their parents or family members or friends or the internet or whatnot. So yeah, I mean, a lot of bad can be done having a large public presence, but a lot of good can be done. And I really want to capitalize on the fact that I have people looking at me just to make the world better.
That's awesome. Yeah, I didn't know that you were kind of invested in a project like that.
Yeah.
So we're coming up on that hour mark, and so I want to be respectful of your time. Just one last question. What was probably one of the biggest realizations that you've had kind of going through this process over the last 10 months or year?
You mean specific to the whole female thing? Female
Yeah.
happy thing? One of the biggest realizations that I've had.
Realizations or impacts, like what sort of changes have you actually noticed that have happened in your life as a result of some of the behaviors you've kind of transitioned into?
Yeah, honestly, the biggest impact that it has had on me is just my self-confidence and self-image. I've never considered myself good looking whatsoever. I've been everybody's wingman. If it's a group of 5 girls and me, I'm literally the wingman for random guys to get with my girlfriends. I never even put myself in. When Hayden first messaged me on Instagram, when he slid into my DMs, I genuinely thought he wanted me to hook him up with one of my friends. I was like, oh yeah, you want me to, tell Allie to come to lunch? He's like, no, I'm inviting you to lunch. And I was like, what, me? You don't want me to introduce you to the other girls in the gym? So yeah, just looking at myself from a different lens, from a different perspective, gave me a lot of confidence, and made me appreciate the way that I look, the way my body looks for what it is. It's different. It's not like everybody else's body, but it's mine, and I'm proud of it because of what it can do. So
that's awesome. So where can people find you?
You can find me on Instagram at Stefi Cohen or YouTube Stefi Cohen. And you can check out all of our programs at hybridperformancemethod.com.
Awesome. Well, it was a fantastic chat. Really, really interesting to hear, your perspective on this and just kind of hear some of the tangents that you went off on. You mentioned that book. It was called The Female Athlete Paradox. Is that right?
Yeah. Well, that's not the name of the book, but it's
okay.
the central topic.
Oh, okay, cool. Well, I'll definitely have to look into that because it's fairly interesting. So yeah, thank you so much for jumping on. It was great. I know everyone is going to come away with a ton. I don't have a massive female following, I don't believe, but even just for me, like, it's really cool hearing that side because again, like I just don't experience that stuff, right? So a lot of this stuff I'm aware of it, but it's somewhat foreign to me until you actually kind of get firsthand perspective of this stuff. So
you'd be surprised how many guys actually end up showing this podcast to their girlfriends. I've met so many girls like at expos and stuff that they're like, oh yeah, my boyfriend showed me your Instagram profile, or your boyfriend showed me your videos, like that. So even if you don't have female followings right now, I'm sure it'll get to them.
That's awesome. Yeah. All right, Stefi, take care.
Thank you.